Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Mr. Wiz here. I hope you've been enjoying this channel. I hope you've been enjoying the lesson so far. In our last lesson, we started building our 2D mobile game, which is going to be a projectile-based game where we shoot at objects that come down from the top of the screen. So in the last video, we got a player that works. Let me go into play mode and I'll show you what we got so far. So we've got a player at the bottom of the screen that when I click on the left side of the screen, he moves left. When I click on the right side of the screen, he moves right. And we were able to create some barriers to keep him from going off the screen. So we did all that in the last video. So today's video, we're going to start working on the obstacles that should fall down from the top of the screen. So that's what we're going to start doing now. So the first thing I want you to do is go find some images to use for your obstacles, right? Remember, any 2D image will work. So you can create your own image if you've got those art skills. You can go find a clip art or a picture from somewhere else. Or, of course, you can use AI to have them create some artwork for you. So a lot of options there. Of course, I want you to remember, just to keep in mind, what we're doing, we're just building this for our own fun. We're not planning on making a game to sell or make any money off of. So taking an image off of Google isn't a copyright problem if you're not selling the game or sharing it with people. This is really just for us. And that's why the pictures I've been grabbing have been off of Google. I'm not artistic. I've just been grabbing images that I've been able to find and use in my games because this is for learning purposes. This isn't commercial use, right? Okay, so go find some pictures for some objects you want to fall from the screen. Go with more than one. You notice I've been saying objects, not just object. Later, we're going to add some randomness so that we'll have multiple objects falling from the top of the screen. So go find a few pictures, okay? Pause this video, go find your pictures, and then when you have them, go into the sprites folder and import them here by importing new assets. I'm going to go ahead and do that with some pictures for me. You should do that for yourself. I'll catch back with you in just a second. All right, so I'm back. I found 3 pictures that I want to use for my space-themed game. I've got 2 different asteroid pictures here, and then also one of a UFO that I thought would be kind of fun to throw into the mix. So those will be the objects falling from the top of the screen that I will later be shooting at once I have that all coded correctly, okay? So for now that you have your objects in your sprite folder, I just want you to pull one of them out. We're just worried about one right now, okay? We'll do the rest of them later. Don't get ahead of me. Don't worry about it. We're just going to grab one right now. So I'm going to grab one. I'm going to put it in my world. Obviously, it's way too big. I'm going to use my tools to adjust it and all that jazz. All right. So how big do I actually want this guy to be? Maybe around that size. That's not bad. All right. I could rotate it if I wanted to. I could do all that jazz. Now we will, in a few moments, create a code that makes it move down the screen. Do you remember what happened to my ship when I rotated it and then I created a code to move it? Because I had rotated the image, when I created the code to move it left and right, it moved diagonally, right? So I'm probably going to end up rotating some of these images. So to be on the safe side, I'm going to create a parent object for this picture, and that will help it work a little bit better, okay? So let's go ahead and create a parent object over here, create an empty, and I'm going to call it obstacle. I can rename it later if I want to. And we're going to go ahead and drag that asteroid picture that I put into that parent object. And I want to reset the positions on all of these to 0, 0, 0. So I want the object and the parent to be at 0, 0, 0. Oops, I didn't mean to click on that. There we go. This will be useful for when I'm setting up positions later. I want to make sure everything lines up. All right, so my asteroid is in the center of my screen now, and so is the parent object that it is attached to. So once again, remember, I'm only doing one object at a time. We'll worry about the rest of them later. So I've got my object, I've got my image. Now, if I want to rotate the image, I am welcome to. It's not going to mess me up, so I can do stuff to it. I can move it whichever way I think looks best for my game, right? And it's not going to cause problems later because it's the parent object that I'm going to give the moving controls to. All right, I think that actually looks pretty cool. I like that angle. All right, so I've got my first object. It's the size that I want it. It's the rotation that I want. Let's go ahead and start giving it some controls. So I'm going to go to my... Oh, I don't have a script folder, do I? I didn't make one last time. This game is going to have multiple scripts, so to keep myself organized, I'm going to go ahead and make a script folder. It's always a good idea to have multiple folders to keep things organized. So I have a script folder now. I'm going to put my player controls in that. And now in my script folder, I'm going to open it up and I'm going to make a new script. So we're going to right click, create C# script. And what should I call this one? I might call this one obstacle controls. Remember, it's always the best practice to name it as soon as you create it. That way you don't have to rename it later. So I'm going to click on C# script. And once it's created, I'm going to go ahead and name it obstacle controls. One word. I'm capitalizing obstacle and I'm capitalizing controls. There's no spaces. I'm hitting enter. And then it should be creating the script for it. And it just did that. And you can see over here where it says public class, it has obstacle controls there. That's why I always name it when I create it. Because if you create it and then name it later, your public class won't match the name of your script, and if it doesn't match, it doesn't work. We've talked about that before, right? The names have to match. Okay, so now that I have a script, I'm going to go ahead and put it on the parent object of my obstacle, the one that I called obstacle. So I'm going to drag that script into there. There we go, and I'm ready to start coding it. So let's double click on that script and start adding some stuff to it. So right now, the big idea is I just want the obstacle to fall down. I want it to go down the screen. So that'll be my first thing that I do here. So in the void update, we're going to go ahead and give it some transform translations, right? Just like we've done a few times in the past. So this is going to be transform.translate. Remember to capitalize translate. And then we're going to do our little parentheses there. And which way do we want to move? We want it to move down. So remember our shortcuts that we've learned before. You can just put vector3 dot down, and that tells us that you're moving it down, right? So we've got that. So now we need to set how fast we want to move down, right? So I'm going to do the multiplication symbol, which is that asterisk. So we're going to take the movement down and we're going to multiply it, and we have to set the speed here. So I could just put in a number, but I want the speed to be a variable so I can change it later. So let's go ahead and create that variable. So up here before the start function, I'm going to create a couple lines. And we're going to go ahead and create a public variable. I could make it an integer or a float. I'm going to make it a float. So that way I can use decimals if I want to. So a public float, and we're just going to call it speed. Make sure you put your semicolon at the end. So now down here, vector3.down is going to multiply by the speed variable that we just made. Let me move my head out of the way here. And then if I go right now, it'll be going at that speed per frame. So once again, just like we've done a few times before, we need to multiply this by time.delta time. Time.delta time. All right. Got to make sure I put my semicolon at the end of this. Let's save that. Control S. All right, so I've created a variable. I gave it some code to move down at the speed that I set, and it should be per second. So let's go back to our program, and it's updating. There we go. If I click on my asteroid, I got to click on the parent object because that's where the script is. Right now the speed is 0. Let's go ahead and give it a speed. I'm going to start with 1 just to see what that looks like. Let's zoom out, and let's see what having a speed of 1 looks like. That is very slow. It works though. So I could leave that and just make that my easy object, because remember I'm going to have multiple objects, right? So I've got an obstacle. I can move it. Let's just drag it just so we can see what it looks like. Let's drag it to the top of the screen here. And yeah, not bad. So what I want to do now is I want to use some of those other images and give them other speeds. So here's what I'm going to do. Rather than doing these same steps over and over again to make my life a little bit easier, I'm going to duplicate this obstacle. So I'm going to click on it and do Control D to duplicate it. And now I have a second one that I can move somewhere. I'll just move it over here. And I can do Control D again to make a third one, and I can drag that over here. But wait, you're saying they all have the same picture. I thought we were going to use different pictures. So here's the cool thing about sprites. You can change the image very easily. So if I open up these obstacles that I made over there, and I click on the sprite part, these are the stats for a simple sprite, the sprite renderer stats. Right here where it says sprite, that's the actual picture. So if you have a sprite that you've already made, everything works good on it, all the stats work good on it, but you decide suddenly, you know what, I might want to change that picture. Rather than having to start all over, you can click where it says sprite here, and you can select a different picture. So here's the other asteroid that I downloaded. I can put that there. Or where's the UFO that I downloaded? I can put that there, right? So let me go ahead and change these other two to the other two pictures that I have. There we go. And let's zoom in so I can see it better. All right, that's not bad. Now, of course, if I decide to change the size of them, I absolutely can. So I can adjust this. I actually like the smaller asteroid with that one. But for the UFO, I might decide to rotate it again. Maybe a little diagonal. That's kind of cool. Maybe I'll make it a little bit bigger. Something like that. That's kind of cool. I could make more of these if I wanted to. There's no reason to stop at 3. I could do more. Maybe I want to do another UFO that's a different direction. So let me duplicate this one. And maybe I want this UFO to be rotated a different way. So this UFO, I'm going to rotate to that angle. Oops, I rotated the parent object instead of the child object. My bad. Undo, Control Z. I do not want to rotate the parent object, or else down will be a different direction. All right, so now I've got one that goes that way. All right, cool. So I've got several obstacles, and I just have them sitting at the top of the screen right now. We haven't coded them to spawn yet. So right now they're just kind of resting up there. But what I do want you to do, once you have your obstacles up there, they look the way you want them to, I want you to give each one its own speed. Remember, this is all part of the parent object, right? So if this one has a speed of 1, maybe this one I'll give it a speed of 2. Maybe I'll just give each one a different. Maybe one of them gets a speed of 3 and one of them gets a speed of 4. Remember, we did make this a float, so you could use decimals as well if you wanted to. You could do 2.5 or something like that. Let's see what it looks like with them all moving at a different speed. All right, that's a little hard to tell. Let's switch over to simulator so I can see it from the simulator view. There we go. Looks pretty good. Now that one's starting to seem really slow, isn't it? Didn't seem so slow before, but it seems really slow now. All right, so we've got objects moving different speeds, and of course, I can adjust those speeds later. Actually, I might adjust them a little bit more now. Which one was the fastest one? The 4? See, that 4 seems super fast to me. And the 1 seems super slow. You know what? I might change the 1 to 1.5. 1.5. And maybe I'll change the 4 to 3.5. Yeah, I feel like that's probably a little bit more playable. And you know what? I could add some more stuff to it now. So because now I have 1 at 1.5, 1 at 2, 1 at 3, and 1 at 3.5. So I might want to add another obstacle and make it 2.5. That way I'll have 5 obstacles and they all have different speeds. I could do that if I wanted to, but I'm not going to do that right now. Before we do the next thing, once you have your sprites working the way you want them to, I need you to make them prefabs. Okay? So I'm going to go to the assets. I don't have a prefab folder right now, so I'm going to go ahead and make one because, like we talked about, you want to stay organized, right? So I'm going to make a prefab folder, and I'm going to put these in my prefab folder, but before I do, let's go ahead and name them. So let's give each one its own name so I know what it is. I'm going to say big asteroid for this one, and I'll put that in my prefab folder. Let's call this one the small asteroid. Put that in my prefab folder. I'll call this one ship 1. Put that in my prefab folder, and I'll call the other one ship 2. So whatever you decide to call them, I like naming my prefabs so they're easier to find later on. All right, so all of the obstacles that we've made so far, I have saved as a prefab. That's going to be important for later on. All right, so what I want to do now is in the scene view, we're going to zoom out because I want you guys to notice something interesting that happens here. When I hit play and they fall down the screen and they go past the player, remember this white box represents the phone screen, right? Even though they're past the player, look at what's happening with these sprites. They still exist in the world. We can't see them on the phone anymore, but they still exist in our game. And if you look over here at the hierarchy window, they still exist in the hierarchy window. So I want you to imagine this is a game where we have multiple obstacles falling. In fact, I can simulate that. I'm in play mode still right now. I can drag and drop some of these prefabs into it in play mode. And you can see they're all falling. So imagine that this is the game, and you got all these obstacles that are falling. But as they leave the screen, they're still in my program. They're not on the screen anymore, but they're still in my program. You can see my hierarchy window is starting to get pretty full of objects. What do you think would happen in a game if you had hundreds of objects that were loaded, even though you weren't using them? They were still running in the background. They're still using memory. What do you think happens to your game when that happens? I bet you already guessed. It can cause some serious lag. Look at all these asteroids and ships that are currently in my world right now, even though they're not on my screen. You get hundreds of those or thousands of those, you're going to create some serious lag in your game. So the next thing that I need to do with my objects, with my obstacles, is I need them to be destroyed when they leave the screen. That way they're not taking up any more memory in my game. So let's get out of play mode. Let's get back to our script. And let's create a way for them to be destroyed when they leave the screen. So on game update, we have them moving down. I'm going to create an if block, because anytime we're doing a situation like this, we're talking about conditions, right? So if a certain thing is true, we have to figure out what that thing is. Then we hit enter. I create my curly brackets here, and then the action needs to happen. So if a certain thing is true, it needs to do something. What do we need it to do? We need it to destroy the object. Do you remember how we did destroy? We did destroy once before. You might not remember it. If you have notes, you can always check those. But we used destroy. It wasn't dot. I don't know why I was putting dot. Destroy, parentheses, game object. Semicolon at the end. Make sure you capitalize that correctly. So if a certain thing is true, we want the object to be destroyed. When we say destroy game object, we're talking about the object that the script is on, right? So this would be the falling objects, our falling obstacles. Once they leave the screen, we need them to be destroyed. So what is the if block we're going to put in there that will cause it to mean that it left the screen? Well, there's different ways you can do that. One of the fun things about code is there's different ways you can run it, right? We could do something to do with the screen size again, kind of like we did last time. But honestly, I think it's probably easiest just to pick a Y number that fits our game. It'll be less code for us anyways. So let's go back to the game real quick here. If I'm looking at one of my obstacles and I drag it down, I just rotated it by accident. Control Z to undo that. Let me grab the arrow. All right, so if it's falling, and it's falling off the screen, if I'm looking at the right-hand side over here in the transform position, it's the Y position that is telling us how far down it's going, right? So for me right now, the bottom of the screen seems to be around -5. If I go a little farther, there's 6 is right there. I got 7, I got 8, I got 9. So I just need it to go off the screen. So I'm going to give it a Y value. I could go with -6 probably. Now, because screens come in different sizes, if I wanted to be extra safe, I might go a number larger than 6, right? Because maybe with a larger size phone, 6 might not be a big enough number. I might need to go further down to 8 or 9 or 10. It doesn't really matter too much, because whether it gets destroyed at 6 or if it gets destroyed at 10 is not going to make much difference in my game, right? The important part is we need to get destroyed and not living forever. If it lives forever, then it's going to cause lag. But as long as it gets destroyed sometime after leaving the screen, I'm okay. So just to be on the safe side, I'm going to use one of these bigger numbers. Maybe 8. 8 seems pretty far off the screen. I doubt there'll be any devices where that's not far enough. So what we're going to do is, keep in mind that's a -8 there, right? So if the transform dot position dot y, so that's telling us it's the y position inside the transform component, right? So transform, position, y. That's what we're reading, those three things. So if the transform.position.y is less than, and I said I'm going to go with -8. You might decide to do a different number. It's not super important as long as it's off the screen, right? So if the transform.position.y is less than -8, then I want it to destroy itself. It's destroying the game object that the script is attached to. So let's save it, Control S, and let's test it. I'm going to drag this guy back up to the top. And let's get into play mode and see what happens. Oh, I got an error. What's my compiler error say? The name transform. Oh, I spelled transform wrong. My students do this all the time, and apparently I do too. I forgot the S right there. Let's save that and try again. All right, I'm going to hit play. There we go. So they're going down the screen. Now, how will I know if they actually got deleted? By my hierarchy window over here. You see that? Everything got deleted. Yep. And there went the big asteroid, was the last one to go because it was also the slowest one. And I can check that again from the scene view, and I can watch it happen in real time here. So as it falls, once it gets past the screen a little ways, it should get deleted. There we go. There we go. And here come the other ones. Boom, boom, boom. And if I was to, while it's in play mode, drag more of these in here, it would keep happening to all of them because keep in mind, they're all using the same script. So we only had to make the edits to the script, and it's affecting every single one of these projectiles. And now, no matter how many projectiles come falling, we won't have that lag problem that's caused from having hundreds of them in the game at the same time because they all get destroyed after leaving the screen. So we have working obstacle. Yeah, it works. So this seems like a good place to stop the video for now. Of course, obviously, we're not done with these. Our next step will be to create a code where they get created at the top of the screen and they fall on their own. And we'll have to set timers, and we'll do a little bit of randomness in there, right? So that will probably be the next video. But for now, just make sure that you have working objects that fall off the screen and get destroyed after they leave the screen. Okay, I hope you learned something new today. If you did, please click that like button. If you're not already subscribed, please subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a great rest of your day.